Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Dux-Soup webinar. I'm Adam Osman, Head of Marketing at Dux-Soup. With me today are Jin Kuzminskates, our Head of Customer Support, and a really lively speaker, Scott Wright of Amped Marketing. Just a few housekeeping points before we start. This is a business-focused webinar rather than a deep dive technical session. There's a lot of technical info accessible via our website and YouTube videos. We've got everyone on mute, but if you do have questions, just pop them in the chat box. Jin will be monitoring this chat box and will answer as many of these as we go along. If you have specific questions for Scott, we'll cover those off at the end. At Scott's request, we've actually allowed plenty of time for a really good Q&A session. Probably the most common question we get asked is all about a recording. So just to confirm, a recording will be available and will be emailed out in around 5 or 6 hours. So on to our speaker. When talking to Scott about this presentation a few weeks ago, a couple of things really jumped out at me. Firstly, he's a real expert at using LinkedIn automation. And this is all stuff that he's learned and he's done himself, so it's really hands-on knowledge. And even with new connection limits on LinkedIn, he's still able to get fantastic results. The other thing that stood out is something Scott mentioned, which I know he'll touch on in the presentation, is that he's the man that LinkedIn couldn't ban, but I'll let him explain the context of it later. I really do think this webinar is crammed full of a lot of practical tips and how-tos. It will give you a playbook for using LinkedIn for lead generation. And I do think there's a lot of information you can start applying straight away to make how you are using Dux-Soup and LinkedIn automation even better, and also to do it safely. I'll now hand over to Scott.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to Dux-Soup and the Dux-Soup team, and thank you to Jin and Adam for being able to set this up and allow me to sort of share my experience. So yeah, to jump a little bit into this, I'd like to start off by giving a little bit of background. Who am I, right? I am the co-founder of Amped Marketing and the COO also as well. But to give a little bit of history of where I came from, I actually have a background of doing cold calls. I used to work for Yelp. For those who don't know, Yelp is a very rigorous cold calling regimen. That's where I developed a lot of my sort of approach skills, if you will, on how to speak to people in unique ways. After Yelp, though, I got a job at a startup, and I was the first BDR, business development representative, basically was hired to make cold calls for that company. While I was there, though, I found out about Dux-Soup, I found out about LinkedIn, and I've been using it ever since. So I've been using it for about 4 years. In the span of using Dux-Soup for about 4 years, like Adam had said, as in his words, the man LinkedIn couldn't ban. It's a good tagline there. LinkedIn, I have been restricted in every way, shape, or form. So I've been restricted to the point where you have to, put your initials. I've also had to upload my passport and ways of identification to prove that I'm not a bot. I have also been permanently restricted, and this was during the days where you could do 100 a day. So this was actually a year ago in October, and then I was able to get unpermanently banned in April this year as well. And my LinkedIn account is still in good standing. Maybe not after this webinar, but we'll see. I'm just kidding. And then from there, I've also managed business development teams. So I've managed teams of other business development representatives and SDRs, if you will, of sales and lead generation. All of them, when I had that team, not one of them had to make a single cold call. We were all using Dux-Soup and Dux-Soup Turbo, and just my sort of approach and skills here that I'm going to share with you, and hopefully you'll get something away from it. Also, my experience comes from selling to generating leads for large enterprise businesses and selling to the C-suite, specifically in the cybersecurity division. So generating leads and meetings and so on and so forth for like CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, and other C-suites as well. And because of this, I have been able to consult multiple different companies for marketing, lead generation, all kinds of different stuff, even in the case of selling body cameras to sheriff's offices, if you can believe that. From there, the company that I was working for got acquired. And because of that, I've been able to now go and be the co-founder of Amped Marketing, which I'll touch on at the very end of this. I do want to end on this. This webinar is based on discussing how I went from 0 to 350 meetings within the short span here. I do want to call out one specific thing, which is using multiple profiles. Now, I'm not going to go into that totally on this call, but that is the way that I was able to achieve that. On this call, what I'm going to go over and show you guys on this call is basically what I call the art of the approach. Now, this is going to be the approach that I used with all of these different profiles. So this is used across the board and still used today. Now, before I jump into this, this is a broad webinar. Like Adam said, this is more business focused. So I hope that you guys pull something away from this. There's a few different tips and tricks in here that I feel like you guys will take away. But overall, there is a unique way of understanding how you approach LinkedIn and how I was able to achieve 350 meetings. So without further ado, the art of the approach. So the first and foremost thing, or sorry, not first and foremost, but the first and foremost thing is that you want to understand how you're going to build your approach. And for this webinar, what I'm going to go ahead and show you is the following. So here's the agenda here, is I'm going to cover that what LinkedIn is. So it's a social platform, not a sales platform. Understanding what your purpose is for reaching out on LinkedIn, making sure that you understand and know your audience of what you're reaching out and the purpose that you're reaching out. Then also determining your Dux-Soup method of approach. So Dux-Soup is a very versatile tool, and so there's many different ways that you can use it. And so understanding which way you're going to use it is going to be important. And then also developing your messaging and understanding how to ask. And then I'm going to end the webinar with 2 examples that you guys can walk away with. Social, not sales. So you've probably had other people tell you this, but it's important to realize what LinkedIn is. LinkedIn is a social media platform. Granted, it's geared towards professionalism, but it is a social media platform, just like Twitter, just like Facebook, just like Instagram, just like, TikTok and all these other things. And so when you think about that, it's important to approach it in that mannerism too, because that's how your audience is perceiving it. So your prospects are on this platform. When they're on LinkedIn, they're not working more times than not. When they're on LinkedIn, they're checking up what a previous coworker is doing. They're looking at what their ex-girlfriend or boyfriend is now working at, right? They're not in their email working, right? So when you understand that, there's a sort of different behavior that you need to understand when approaching LinkedIn. And you don't want to treat it as an extension of your calls and emails. So you don't want to be approaching this as a way to say, oh, hey, I'm not sure if you saw my previous email, but blah, blah, blah. That's not the way to approach this. Because when you add this person to your network, they're now a part of your network even when you leave that company, right? So it's just like if you were to follow somebody on Instagram, when that person's going to be following you now, or you're going to be following them for until you stop following them or deactivate your account, right? So it's important to reflect that, and it's important to just be yourself, right? Think about your social media presence, right? How are you on Twitter? How are you on Facebook? How are you on Instagram? How are you in your day-to-day, if you will, right? You want to be yourself and be genuine. So you want to be able to say LOL or ROTFL, or if you use exclamation points, then use exclamation points. Basically, be genuine, right? Here's a couple of examples of something to do when you're trying to connect with somebody. Hey, first name, looking to connect with others in the security space. Do you know of any good communities? Right? That's genuine. But what you don't want to do is, hey, first name, following up on my previous email, thought I'd try it here. Let me know when you have 15 minutes for a demo. That is not the approach that you want to do, right? So be genuine, be curious, and realize that LinkedIn is a social platform, not a sales platform. even though that's how we're kind of using it, right? If you will. The next part of this, of the agenda here, is to know what your purpose is. Why are you connecting with this person? Why are you trying to connect with this person? What are you trying to connect, or what are you trying to do? So understanding your purpose and what is the definition of purpose, the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. So why are you reaching out? A webinar, in-person events, brand awareness, obtaining product feedback, trying to set up a sales appointment, discovery meetings, send specific content, et cetera, et cetera. It's important to understand what your purpose is when you're reaching out, because your outreach process should reflect what your purpose is. Your outreach process should be different if you're trying to promote an in-person event rather than a sales appointment, if you will, right? Now, granted, at the end of the day, everyone on this webinar and everyone that uses Dux-Soup is all about, generating more money and revenue and opportunities. So I get that. But it's important to note that there are different reasons that you could be reaching out, and you could be a lot more genuine from doing this. So once you've defined what your purpose is, you next need to match your audience. So what you want to do is you want to empathize with your audience. So when you're building your list, you're building your search, you're building whatever it is, you want to be able to put yourself in the mindset of the person on the other side of this. So understand, what do they care about? What certifications are they excited about their career? What tools do they use? Or really anything else? What types of groups or things like that? And the best way to do this is when you're building your search, build what you think is the best search and pull up a couple profiles and look at what you can see in common. For example, here's Giles. For those who don't know Giles, he's at Dux-Soup. He's a fantastic fan. I think he's on vacation right now. I don't know if he's listening to this, but when I look at Giles, let's say that I am selling a training software. When I look at Giles, I look at his LinkedIn profile. I see the following. I see coach, I see trainer, I see webinar presenter, I see consultant, I see IT, lead generation, and then I see head of professional services. Professional services, coaching, training, what does that tell me? Well, that tells me that Giles is interested in teaching. He likes sharing his knowledge. And what I also see is that it says head of professional services at Dux-Soup, but it says that at the end. That's interesting. That could maybe tell me that he's not necessarily comfortable, but I would say maybe he's not egotistical. He doesn't necessarily have his title as the first thing. It's the last thing. And I see professional services. When I think of professional services, that is basically working with customers, doing front-facing work. So he's somebody who likes to teach, coach, and train and empower others. So when I hear that, I want to reflect that in my messaging, and I want to reflect that with the rest of my audience. And so I want to build and understand that for my purpose of reaching out to people, if that makes sense. It's also important to note any type of groups, connections of, and any type of location as well. So these can all play a sort of a factor into doing your outreach. And when you are building your search, make sure you utilize the keyword search at the top of your Sales Navigator profiles, because that's where you're going to be able to do different types of searches for other people, if that makes sense. Once you know your audience and you have your list and you're ready to start reaching out to them, it's important to determine your best method of approach. So how I went from 0 to 350 is I understood the different ways I could use Dux-Soup. And I have sort of divvied them out in this way, which are 3 different methods that you can approach: semi-automated, fully automated, and the first degree feature. So with semi-automated, what this is really good for is just sending out connection requests. This is also really good for for salespeople, BDRs, business development representatives, or sales development representatives, really anyone who generates their own leads, and that's what their sole specific goal is on a day-to-day basis. And what's really great about it is you can customize all of your follow-ups. So I can highly customize, coming back to our previous slide here, I can customize my response to Giles by saying specific things in follow-ups. It is very time intensive though. That takes a lot of time out of somebody's day, right? So somebody who doesn't have this time isn't very, this may not be the best use of your time here. On top of that, you don't have to worry about any automation going out on top of you. So like if you're using the multi-drip campaign for Dux-Soup, you don't have to worry about messages getting sent out on top of you, or like if you're following up with somebody and you're like, why is this message going out to this person? You don't have to worry about that in the semi-automated because you're just using Dux-Soup to send out connection requests. And you feel a lot more genuine, but it's very time intensive. So that's semi-automated. It's great for when you have a team of BDRs or SDRs and you want them to follow up manually and be able to write customized sort of follow-ups and responses and that kind of thing. Then there's the fully automated. This is what we use to this day, and I'm going to go ahead and give you guys some examples later on in this call. But this is to conduct end-to-end prospecting using Dux-Soup's multi-drip campaign. This is great for agencies and people really managing multiple LinkedIn accounts. It is less personalization and there's less customization, but the outreach and engagement is a lot higher because you're doing it more automated and you can scale out and be able to touch more people, but it does require a lot of organization and it does require some discipline. There are some main rules that you need to follow, right? Make sure that you don't send out manual follow-ups or these and that type of stuff. But when you get it down, and I'm going to cover some of these topics, you can set it to an almost set and forget type of style. So if you configure the planner and a few other things, and we'll go over that here in just a minute. The last method that I use Dux-Soup for is this feature, which I don't know exactly what the best feature to call it is, but I call it the first degree feature, which basically is the feature inside of the actions tab. And I'll use an example here later on in this webinar to send out one-time specific messages that scale to a group of your network. So it's good for approaching your current network with quick messages. It does require careful consideration of your list and who you're reaching out to, because you may or may not have had conversations with these people. And you need to be able to develop messaging that reflects that. So agnostic messaging, right? But I will give you guys an example of this here. But in short, this is the three different types of three different types of Dux-Soup methods that I use in achieving 350 meetings in such a short amount of time. So best configuration tips once you have figured out which way you're gonna go. The best way to sort of configure your Dux-Soup, which is highly, highly important, is to adjust the planner. Now, the planner was always something I sort of put in the back of my mind and didn't really use for a really long time, for years, until recently. But when I started using it, because I'm scaling and managing so many different profiles, what I found is it's a blessing, especially with the fact that we can only do 100 a week. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is I set the throttle to 20 invites a day, and I set the planner for whatever profile I'm using to the business hours they work in. So if they're working on the East Coast in the United States, then I set it to East Coast time, and I make sure that there's no more than 20 invites sent out for that day. Then I'll go ahead and bring up their list or their search. I'll hit play, and now it's on autoplay, if that makes sense. You're also going to want to set the cancel pending invites. That is going to be important. If you do not use that, please use that. What I do on a day-to-day basis, or in general, is I set it to 30 to 45 days. You can also set it to the duration of your campaign if that's something that you want, but always do use it, and you never want to have thousands of connections. Funny little story, I was consulting a company at one point, and I was looking at the profile of somebody, and they had 6,000 pending invites. That is not a mistake. They had 6,000 pending invites, and they were not throttled from LinkedIn, which is interesting. But anyways, I digress. Set the cancel pending invites. That's always going to be a number one. Throttling. I leave it to default. So I do not adjust the throttle speeds, so I don't go faster, I don't go slower. I leave it to the default of what it is. And I just make sure that I adjust just the throttle for invites being sent out for that day, which are 20 a day. Then for Sales Navigator, some configurations that you can do here. Create your search or your list for 100 or more. This is important because if you create it for 100 or more and you set the parameters from the planner and you set the throttle properly, then in theory, if you have 500 people in your list, you're set for 5 weeks. Additionally, you're going to want to use the account blacklist. So LinkedIn is a blessing and a curse when it comes to the LinkedIn feature is a blessing and a curse when it comes to the Sales Navigator lists that you can exclude and include. It's fantastic because you can go ahead and create account blacklists of people or clients or customers that you're sort of using. But then it also kind of sucks because you can't include an account and a lead list. You can only include one or the other. But in short, my best practices is to create an account or blacklist for all your clients or your profiles or yourself of companies and customers that you want to make sure that you do not reach out to using your searcher list. The other part of this is I always use remove contacted. I also use remove saved and viewed just to make sure when I'm operating inside of another client's account that I'm not touching anyone that they may have touched before. But in general, you always want to remove the contacted leads filter because to make sure that you're reaching out to just net new prospects. Consider adjusting geo to HQ, not contact. So this was actually, I feel like a push, an update that LinkedIn put out recently, or not recently, well, within a year or two. But when you go to the location, if you open that up, a lot of people don't know that there's a little option at the bottom that says, do you want to look by zip code? Do you want to look by contact? Or do you want to look by company HQ? That was a game changer for me. So I changed it to HQ. Just be sure that you're reaching out to the relevant people that you want though. But those are some tips and tricks that I use across the board for setting up my fully automated method of approach and some configuration tips. Next, messaging. The key to this webinar and the art of it, if you will, how to ask. It's important to remember what LinkedIn is, again, which is a social media platform. It's not a sales platform. Once you have your audience down and you've empathized with them and you've put yourself in their shoes, you know who they're reaching, you know who they are, you know what you want to say to them, you know what they go through on their day-to-day basis. You've set your automation configuration tips. Now you develop your messaging. And so with this, when you sum all this up together, you got to remember that while your ideal goal is to get to your call to action, but before that, your primary goal should be to get a response. That is the primary goal. Whether it's a no, whether it's a yes, whether it's a expletive to leave you alone, or they call you this, the goal is to get a response. That's the first and number one thing. Then your next goal is to obtain your call to action or your purpose, your webinar, your getting feedback on your beta platform, landing sales meetings, whatever it is, right? But before that, you want to make sure that you get a response. So how do you obtain this? You ask open-ended questions. You have to be curious, be genuine, and remember that they know everything and you know nothing. This is crucial, and this is a key to my success. If I can share anything from this webinar, that is going to be the main thing. Asking open-ended questions and always asking questions and remembering that they know everything and you know nothing. So an example of this, using Giles again, here up on the right-hand side, I would approach Giles or a lot of different people in this mannerisms. If I was selling some sort of training software, if you will, I would approach Giles by saying, hey Giles, what have you, I see that you're very well experienced in training and coaching. What have you seen as a industry change as it comes to training software in the last 2 years? Or, hey Giles, just wanted to connect with others. Noticed your experience in training, noticed your experience in coaching and training and webinars. I would love to hear your thoughts and pick your brain about how COVID has really adjusted sort of training in general, right? Asking open-ended questions is going to lead to a better response than being able to say, hey Giles, I have a training software that I'd really love to show you. That's not going to work as well. So that's going to be one of the main differences here. Now I'd like to show you a couple examples of how I've used Dux-Soup. Here is a straightforward example of a campaign that I've developed. So this is a live campaign that we have run with one of our clients. I'm not going to say who the client is, obviously, for privacy purposes, but we can walk through this together, as I think it'll be very helpful for everyone. So the message is saying, first name, looking to connect or looking for feedback from people with background in marketing insights for a beta platform that is in stealth mode. We have been developing that tests and verifies the effectiveness of any ad creative of third-party audiences. Your background is perfect. Let's connect and chat more. So you're coming in by not being salesy, and you're also coming in by saying, I'm looking for feedback. And then on top of that, you're looking for a background that matches your audience, and your purpose is to get feedback, right? Once they accept, there's a 2-hour delay. So I normally do the default campaign features here. There's a 2-hour delay once they accept. The follow-up that's going to come through is going to say, thanks for the connection. I reached out because your background will be perfect to provide some feedback on a stealth platform we've been developing for running creative experiments to gain audience insights from Facebook or Google Audience for a fraction of the cost. We have a select few clients of your size in beta with us now, and if you're interested, I would be happy to discuss how you could use it, obviously at no cost. Do you have a few minutes next week? This is not a sales call. Now, this message is basically restating what I said in the connection message to an extent, but with a little bit more fleshed out idea of what I'm asking for. This works very well on LinkedIn when you are asking for feedback, especially if you are asking for feedback on a specific area where they have expertise in. So, and another example of this would be like, hey, I'm looking for feedback on my new iPhone feature or something like that, right? Even if that feature that you just created is not new, maybe it's not in beta, maybe it's a feature you've had for years, a part of your product or your solution, the prospect's not going to necessarily know that. And as long as you know that going into the call, you're going to be fine. So you could say, let's say you've had a feature in your product for years. You can call it a beta, and you'd say you want to still get updates on it. They're not going to necessarily know, and it's not totally a bait and switch. You could say, hey, we just released this new feature that I've had for years. But at the end of the day, you're asking for feedback. Next, if they don't respond, I delay for 2 days. The next follow-up would be, curious, are you collecting first-party audience data in any way? Now, again, I'm asking an open-ended question, and I'm trying to do this at scale, but I give a little bit of context to my question. I ask because our primary focus is helping advertisers collect data needed to provide or to drive predictive insights on audiences across Google or Facebook. Okay, that added a little bit of context to my question, but then I skip a line and then I follow up with one further question to push this conversation forward. Considering your background and expertise, remember, they know everything, we know nothing. We'd love to get your thoughts on it and maybe even collaborate with us. People love the ability to provide their feedback and expertise on something and maybe even be a part of something that will be beneficial for them in the future. And then you come on the ask, are you open next week for a few minutes, right? Then if they don't respond after that, you have to remember, you've just sent them 3 messages. You sent them a connection message, a follow-up, and a second follow-up, and they haven't responded to any of those. It's now time for you to bow out. Remember, LinkedIn is a social platform, not a sales platform. So you need to bow out properly and, excuse me, you need to bow out properly and remember that you can use this connection later down the road. So maybe they say no now, but later down the road, you want to target them for a webinar you're having or a specific feedback or something. Well, you want to make sure you bow out and protect that connection. So you want to bow out with a message like, appreciate the addition to your network. If you ever have a few minutes to take a look at our early solution, we'd love feedback and love to meet you, right? So you're basically saying, hey, I see that you haven't responded to my previous messages. It's totally cool. I'm going to go ahead and leave you alone. This is going to be important because otherwise you're going to come off as spam. Cool. So this is an example, but overall, the framework that I'm trying to convey here is you come in not salesy here. You come in saying, I want feedback. You come in here being genuine. You're asking open-ended questions, and you're basically saying it's not a sales call, which I've consulted clients, and clients have said, yeah, but Scott, we have our first meeting that was set from you guys, but they're expecting feedback. Well, I challenge you and say, what's the difference between getting feedback and having a discovery call with a first-time prospect? What I mean by that is when you get on a call with somebody and you start chatting, you're gonna show them the product. And the person on the other side, whether this was a sales call that was set up via cold call, cold email, whatever, it doesn't matter. They get on the call and you're gonna show them your product or demo, whatever it is. They're gonna say, this is terrible or bad, or this is okay, this is whatever, or I don't want to involve this. They're basically gonna comment on your product and they're gonna comment on your demo. They're gonna comment on that, which is in turn feedback, right? So if they like your product and they like these things, they're going to say, oh my God, this is amazing. I need to go ahead and introduce you to my technical team so that we can have a deeper dive conversation with who this is gonna be associated with. They're not gonna be like, hey, I thought this was gonna be about feedback, because that's what it is at the end of the day. Feedback and a sales demo can be linked as one-on-one and the same, so it's important to realize that. Cool. Next example. I labeled this slide a little bit wrong, but this is an example of using the first degree feature. So let's imagine that we want to promote a whiskey happy hour to chief information security officers that we're already connected to. How would we do that? What's the best method of approach using Dux-Soup? Well, if you think about this, you would build a search inside of LinkedIn, and it would be for first degree connections, and then you would adjust your titles to be for chief information security officers. Then you got to realize, okay, I'm looking at a list of first degree connections. I may or may not have had a conversation with these people already, right? You could be in mid conversation with somebody and then you just hadn't picked it up. So you have to develop agnostic messaging, which I was mentioning before. How do you do that? Well, here are some examples that have worked for me. An example here, I forgot to mention, first name, we're sending bottles of XYZ whiskey to a few select CISOs for an exclusive networking event. Would love to have your attendance, and then put in the link. Another example, not sure if you heard, but we're throwing an intimate whiskey happy hour for other CISOs in the area and thought you might be open to participating in the discussion. Then insert the link. Again, focus on the first part of this messaging. I forgot to mention, not sure if you heard. These are all things that you can sort of use as agnostic messaging. And if you were in the middle of a conversation with a CISO and of this first degree messaging, right, list that you have, it's not going to sound weird. If you think about that, let's give you an example. Let's say I was talking about my dog to the CISO and we left mid-conversation. This could come in as a message right after that and it wouldn't look like I skipped a beat. Not, I forgot to mention, not sure if you heard. Rather than saying, hey, first thing, we're having this CISO happy hour, like that comes off as spam. It doesn't look genuine. Again, I don't know what to call this feature totally. I call it the first degree feature, but it's done via this actions tab. So when you click on the actions tab in the Dux-Soup options, there's a tab, I would say like 4 or 5 toggles down in the middle of the page. And you turn that on and it says send personalized message to first degree connections using LinkedIn or Sales Navigator. And that's an example of what I'd put there. Also, I don't always use the titles. So the underscore title, I forgot what the names of these are called, but the underscore FN brings the first name, and then there's one for last name, there's one for titles, there's one for companies, et cetera, et cetera. I don't use those in automation for the full scale. The reason being is because some people have their titles as like security ninja or this or that. And when you do that at scale, you're going to encounter issues where it's like, oh, so-and-so, was reaching out to other cybersecurity ninjas. Like that doesn't sound right. So I just really only use the first name feature of that portion there. So other than that, that's basically it. That's a long, very, very broad overview of my approach. Overall, if I could wrap this up in terms of takeaways, be genuine, know your purpose, know how you can use Dux-Soup, what different methods there are, semi, fully automated, or the first degree feature. Ask open-ended questions, and remember, they know everything, you know nothing, right? So play to that, ask open-ended questions and be curious, and try to strike up a response in a conversation, and treat LinkedIn like a social platform, not like a sales platform. And in short, everyone on this call, by the way, you can get at me if you're interested. You can contact me via email, scott@antmarketing.com. You can also, for everyone on this call, if you email me and you mention this webinar, I'll go ahead and give you a free 30-minute consulting session. And in that consulting session, I'll answer whatever question you have, whether it's technical or I have experience writing some code not for Dux-Soup, but I have developed the HubSpot integration before there was a native HubSpot integration. I've done a lot of different things on the technical aspect. So if you have questions that are technical or want to know the best way to use Dux-Soup, anything at all relating to Dux-Soup and automation and LinkedIn in general, I'm happy to answer that question. And then on top of that is my company. What we do at Amped Marketing is we are able to basically make Dux-Soup to an extent very seamless and easy for you. We utilize it, we'll use your credentials and all that stuff, and we will be able to manage your outreach and be able to set meetings, promote brand awareness, events, really everything. Think of it as like a managed service, if you will, to an extent. That being said, I think I've covered everything, and I will go ahead and leave the rest open for Q&A. So that being said, I'll pass over everything back to Adam. Thank you so much, Adam.
Hi, thank you so much for your webinar. A lot of very interesting points were made. So going to Q&A, we have quite a few questions. First question would be from Christina. She's asking, do you still do cold calls?
I do not. So I haven't made a cold call. Well, okay, so here's a funny story. When I did manage, I was managing a team of BDRs. They were all fresh out of college. We had 5 of them. They were expecting to make a bunch of cold calls when they were on the team, and I told them they weren't going to have to. And just for fun, we decided to have a 2-hour session where we made cold calls. And what was the result of it? Well, no one answered. So, like, I don't do the cold calls. There can be times when you make your cold call as it's relevant. So let's say you've had a conversation with somebody on LinkedIn, you go back and forth, and the person drops off in the middle, right? They don't respond to you anymore. If you have their number, but only if their number is on LinkedIn, that's another part. You could cold call them there and be like, hey, so-and-so, I wanted to continue our conversation on LinkedIn, and I got your phone number actually from LinkedIn. It's on your LinkedIn profile. Thought I would, chat with you here, if that's okay with you. That's okay, but in short, no, I do not do any more cold calling.
Thank you. Michael is asking, can you share a horror story when someone you socially reached out to was super pissed off? How did you handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have quite a few horror stories. I have one where I was using obviously Dux-Soup and all this. We were using our automation at scale, all that. Somebody screenshotted our stuff and our company and actually posted it on Twitter saying, look at these jabronis or something like that, right? what we did, and then there was also before, and this is no nod, I love Dux-Soup, by the way, so this is no knock to you guys, but before the fully automated multi-drip sequence campaign was fully built out, there were times when we would try and use it and messages were getting sent out even though we didn't want them to, right? And so people were asking, why are you sending me this again? The best way to handle that, I think his name is Michael, the best way to handle that is get in front of it as soon as you can. So let's say you send an automation message to somebody and you didn't mean to and you catch it, jump in front of it and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. This is just an example. LinkedIn has 2 different inboxes. They have Sales Navigator and regular, and I meant to send this to somebody else, and I totally apologize. I know it looks the same and blah, blah, blah. So funny, and blah, blah, blah. Like jump in front of it and call yourself out. And again, that's being genuine of who you are as a person. Don't just let it sit, because that's how you'll get flagged.
Thank you very much. Another more technical question. So do I need Sales Navigator for your approach to work? By Chris is asking this question.
Yeah, you don't need Sales Navigator for my approach to work. You can also use like a CSV and upload this and use the same sort of features. You will need Dux-Soup Turbo in this case, right? Because I'm using the multi-drip campaign. But overall, if you're being genuine and you're taking this approach, you can take this approach. This is, again, with or without automation, with Dux-Soup or without Dux-Soup, right? Understanding what LinkedIn is and being able to ask open-ended questions and engage people, that's going to be the #1 key to your success. So you don't need Sales Navigator, but it does help significantly.
Thank you. Daniel is asking, at our organization, we manually send out LinkedIn connection requests. We sometimes get a timeout or ban from sending any more like spam prevention. Does this also happen with the Dux-Soup automated method?
So yeah, it's interesting that you're on this webinar talking about Dux-Soup and automation. But if you're sending out manual connection requests, that's definitely good. It's a way to stay under the radar, but there is the 100 limit a week. Now, the 100 limit a week, so actually, I'm going to take your question to a little bit of an area and talk about something that recently happened with LinkedIn, as some people may know on this call. So LinkedIn, as of, I think it was last week, they made an error on their side to some extent, where people started getting flagged for different reasons and getting kicked out. From my research and what I was able to see, this is definitely a push for LinkedIn to try and stop automation like Dux-Soup. So you definitely want to stay under the radar, and using less automation, like the semi-automated approach, is good. But you still are going to be limited to the 100 people. Now, you could sometimes send out a little bit more than 100, depending on what your social selling index is on LinkedIn. So basically how well LinkedIn likes you. But it's always good practice to just, stay a little bit underneath the 100 when and where you can. That being said, also, I think actually, Dux-Soup, you guys quoted me for your article when you were addressing the 100 limit ban for the week. And what I said there is, like, we're no longer using a machine gun approach, right? Of just sending out 100 a day. We're using a more sniper approach. So this is where, again, in my webinar, using open-ended questions, being genuine, being targeted, and going after the right people. Sending 20 a day still works very well. 100 a week is more than enough to get your desired results that you're looking for, especially if you're managing different profiles. So hopefully that answered your question in a long-winded way.
Thank you very much. Another question would be, what recommendations do you have on your own profile? How to set up your own LinkedIn profile from Brennan?
Oh, this is a great question. So I love this question, because I really think that it should be a reflection of who you are and discuss. I love golden retrievers, and sometimes I think of a golden retriever and I look at my face, as you can see here, and I think of a golden retriever for some reason. But this is the way I come off, right? And I am able to reflect that. So I don't think that you should try to make yourself look like somebody that you're not, right? Don't necessarily make yourself look amazing. Going back to Giles, Giles is very much a very warm, easy to talk to, somebody who wants to help you sort of question, and his profile sort of reflects that. But there's a little interesting story I'd like to sort of give off here. One of the people on my team that I had a while back, she was fresh out of college, and she had barely just made her LinkedIn profile, and it had emojis on there on her profile, right? And I was a little concerned about that, but I thought of this as an A/B test. I said, you know what, let's go ahead and give this a shot anyways. Before you change it, let's try this out. Well, we tried it, and lo and behold, we ended up setting a meeting with General David Petraeus. So let that sink in for a second. Like, he's not a part of the US military anymore, or really any of this. But even though she had emojis on her profile, is because of the way she approached, the way she was reaching out and her messaging, that really mattered. So coming back to your question, how should you have your profile set up? Honestly, your profile is not going to matter as much as your messaging and what you're trying to say. And if you use LinkedIn as a social media platform like it's designed to, and you engage people properly, you're not going to have to worry about that other side of the stuff, right? You're not going to have to worry about having a model, Ryan Gosling or Brad Pitt photo on there, because that's going to increase it. You're just going to need to worry about, like, what is the messaging in the context? I don't have any statistics around this, but my gut tells me that most people they'll look at your profile, but they're not spending hours or as much time as you may think looking at the details. Oh, what did he, where did he come from? What did he do, right? They're probably going to spend 10 seconds at max on your profile when you first message them, right? So it's more about, like, asking open-ended, curious, educational questions and trying to strike up a conversation, rather than going out and taking model headshots and making sure that your profile looks, perfect or anything like that. Great question, though.
Thank you very much. Another question: when providing services like outsourcing, would you approach CIO via LinkedIn?
Yes. Oh, 100. Absolutely. I'll approach anyone. It does not matter whether you're a college kid or you are a Barack Obama, right? It does not matter in this case. And my General Petraeus example I just gave you shows that directly, right? It doesn't matter. If they have a LinkedIn profile, you can reach out to them, and you shouldn't be afraid to reach out and connect to this person. There's no reason for you to be afraid. At the end of the day, the person says no, and the worst case scenario that happens is they unremove you as a connection, and that rarely happens. Remember, put yourself in the shoes of your prospect, everyone. Put yourself on the other side of this. Ask yourself this question. Do you remove connections, right? Who do you engage with on LinkedIn? How do you have conversations with your friends? Once you understand that perspective, it's the same exact thing on the other end. Whether you're a CIO or you're the director of the FBI, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? People are people. And so making sure to be genuine and approach people and yourself is going to be a lot more respected than coming at them from, like, a sales perspective. So great question. But yes, I would approach them. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Chris is asking another question. In the fully automated portion campaign, where the follow-ups end, would you handle communications via email or LinkedIn InMail?
Yeah, great question. So I never use InMails. I hate InMails. I hate them so much. I think it's a really garbage way for LinkedIn to make money. I love LinkedIn, but at the same time, I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? No, these are all done first degree messaging and making genuine connections and sending out follow-ups. I try with all of my clients to keep everything on LinkedIn. So if you look at this campaign example here, you'll notice that any way the person responds to follow up 1, 2, or 3, any way they respond is going to be yes or no thanks, or it's going to be yes or sure or next week sounds good, or yes, I'd like more information, or here's my email, let's book some time next week. Or it's going to be one of those, or it's going to be no, not interested, no thank you, not at this time, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. But that being said, when somebody says yes, or I'd like more information, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If it's a positive response, I will always, always, always get the email and set the meeting on LinkedIn. Think of it as fishing, right? You're fishing, you're out on your boat, you cast out your line, you caught the fish, you're having a conversation, you're reeling the fish in, you're having a conversation with the prospect. there's no reason why you should take it over to email, because now you just added a new medium and barrier to where you send an email. Now you got to wait till the person opens the email, reads the email, then responds to you via email. They're already in front of you talking to you on LinkedIn. Just close the loop on LinkedIn and set the meeting there. That's that's how we handle our stuff. Good question though.
Thank you very much. John is asking, do you know what times are good to send connections?
Yeah, so one of my, I don't know if he's on this webinar, but his name's Connor. Shout out to him. He always coined this term called night ducks. Night ducks is because he would like to run his automation and a lot of stuff at night because that was an increased engagement. I don't have the exact statistics on it. I could run the numbers if I needed to. But in general, we have noticed that people at the end of the day and during the nights tend to respond more. And that makes sense when you think about it, right? Again, think about what LinkedIn is, social media platform. When you're working at your cubicle during your office, sure, you may open up Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, but you're mostly in your inbox, you're in your email or graphic design network or whatever the heck it is you're doing, right? So when you think about that, like at the end of the day, you're going to probably start to do the things that relieve your stress. So you're going to open up your LinkedIn, your social media platforms. You're going to see that, oh, look, this guy Connor added me on my network. Great, I'm going to hit accept. And then you're going to be able to have a conversation that way. So in short, the best approach, I think, is after hours and during the weekends are good too. Great question.
Thank you. Another question from Emmanuel. He's asking, how do you see applying these methods to B2B European market? Is there anything to be tailored depending on the market?
Great, that's another fantastic question. So I am here based in the United States. You can see my profile photo. It's in San Francisco is where I'm based out of. But I have had experience with clients and also just doing my day-to-day work with doing UK outreach. And then also doing European outreach. So best practices there, it's different. And this is where, if I'm being honest, I haven't had the best success rates that I have here in the US that I've had in Europe, but that's also because I need to know my audience better in Europe. I need to understand how people perceive LinkedIn and how they approach the social media platforms. I've used this approach does still work, especially with GDPR and all that stuff. It still is it's good practice to be genuine and take a genuine approach, and just make your primary focus in Europe, make your primary focus to like get a connection and have a conversation. Be that your primary focus. I just want to have a conversation with this person, right? So let's just have a conversation, and it doesn't have to be about your specific product. Make it something, if you're selling educational software, training software, make it about education. Talk to them about where they see the education market being in 5 years, and have a conversation and make that your goal. And then it comes off a lot more natural. These practices will still work there, but I have had some experience, and I also have some experience using XING, which is like the German sort of LinkedIn alternative. And these tactics work on that platform and in general, because these tactics are just coming from a genuine place, right? Asking open-ended questions, being curious, educational, and making sure they know everything. But hopefully that answers your question. If you have others, feel free to contact me. I can answer those. But what's the next question we have here?
Next question would be, what to do if your account got blocked by LinkedIn?
Yeah, great question. So it depends on what type of locks, right? So if your account got permanently banned, it's always best practice to obviously appeal, but you want to think of those as bullets in your revolver, if you will, right? You can only make a few appeals to LinkedIn before you are going to be flagged in something else. So you want to make that appeal, and you're going to want to play as dumb as possible to an extent, but you're also going to want to call yourself out. I'll give you an example. Let's say you got restricted from LinkedIn for using obviously Dux-Soup, but it was your first time, right? Your first time getting flagged. Just go in and you can be genuine with them. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I wasn't able to use this software to blah, 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 and be real with them. And they'll be like, okay, no worries. If it happens again, then be like, you can go the whole my account got hacked or this or that or those types of things. Then lastly, what I will say is I've also dabbled, I do not recommend this, but it is something, we could have a conversation, contact me after this, but I have done duplicate profiles and created dummy profiles. And so I have some experience doing that. But overall, I have always taken this approach to where if LinkedIn is going to permanently restrict me, I'm more than happy to just, how do I say this, blow up my LinkedIn account and start from scratch, again, using these best practices. And I have no doubt that I'll be able to build my connection base back up from where it was. And right now, I think I'm standing at 10 or 15,000 connections at this moment, if that makes sense. But yeah, great question.
And the last question, Edwin is asking, what are the most common errors to avoid when starting to use Dux-Soup?
Yeah, most common errors to avoid. One, decide very, very thoroughly, like I just covered in this entire outreach tracker. Actually, let me bring that slide back up. Decide how you're going to use LinkedIn, or sorry, Dux-Soup. If you're going to use a semi-automated approach where you're just going to use Dux-Soup to make the connection requests and follow up with them manually, or you're going to, do the fully automated, decide how you're going to do it and stick to it. If you're going to use fully automated, you need to realize that you cannot follow up with people manually, right? Let me give you an example. Let's say you're using fully automated and you reach out to a list of people, and a really hot prospect is you sent out the second follow-up message to him, and you're like, oh my God, I saw him on the street at Starbucks and I want to mention that to him. So you pull up his profile and you type this in. You don't want to do that, right? Because then what's going to happen is you may forget that he's already in a campaign and he gets a message. So you have to stick to your guns of the fully automated or the semi-automated and whatever that's going to be, right? So don't do like a hybrid approach. Stick to one and do it all the way through. In the semi-automated, it's more manual because you have to I got a new connection. Now I need to manually follow up with this person. But at least you don't have to worry about any fully automateds going out. So my advice to you is be very careful with the automation and think through your purpose, know who your audience is, and decide how you want to use Dux-Soup, and then craft your messaging accordingly and stick to your guns until you finish that kind of aspect.
Thank you very much. That's it from me, and over to Adam.
Thank you very much, Scott, for taking us through. I think I really like the art of the approach, the art of what's possible. And I hope what people are taking away, just from some of the notes I've written down, I think you've provided some sort of fundamental building blocks for how you can incorporate Dux-Soup and LinkedIn automation into your lead generation. I really liked how you talked about having a clear purpose, but also being authentic in your messaging and not trying to be someone or something that you're not. I think that always gets found out further along the line. It was interesting to hear some of your experiences about staying safe with Dux-Soup using the planner. I think really liked your little tip about using setting the location to HQ. I think that's it's really nice for sort of zeroing in on your ideal target profiles and target prospects. I quite like how you approach your messaging as well, Scott, and asking a lot of open-ended questions, because I still get some really bad connection messages and follow-up messages on LinkedIn pretty much every day. I know not everyone is a big fan of templated messages, but I think I thought your approach about asking for feedback as a way of getting the engagement going, getting that conversation and dialogue going was quite an interesting approach. And I think you've really given, hopefully, people a bit of a framework that they can build, develop, adapt for their own particular purposes. I think we tried to cover as many of the questions as we could on the webinar, but if you still have outstanding questions, feel free to get in touch with Dux-Soup support, or Scott with a very generous offer to spend some time. I know he's constantly on our Facebook user group answering questions from other users, so feel free to use him as a resource to pick his brains and find out a bit more about some of those specific issues that are interesting for you. So Scott, thanks again for bringing your energy and your experience. Jim, thank you very much for comparing all the questions and going through the questions as we were going through the webinar. Thank you to our audience for joining us on this webinar.
Of course, I would just like to end with this closing statement. I'll just say this. Thank you to Dux-Soup. And at the end of the day, Dux-Soup changed my life significantly over the last 2 years. And it really means a lot. And this webinar was very broad. I understand that. But it's hard for me to sort of pack all of my knowledge into such a short time. I'm more than happy to share this, and I'm always wanting to talk shop on this stuff. So please get at me and connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email, however, and be more than happy to chat with you guys. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and see you later.
Thanks, everyone.